You were always the best of men during the worst of times. I need you to be that man one more time. Ethan Hunt and his team are gonna save the world from some evil villainy. One more time, we've got plane crashes and a submarine and some great grandiose stunts. One more time. Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning is the last entry in the long-running Mission Impossible franchise that started all the way back in 1996. The movies, that is. It actually is based on a series that happened well before that. So for those that have been paying attention to the channel recently, I decided to rewatch the entire line of Mission Impossible movies. Now, I will say that while I appreciate the stunts and the grandiose nature, especially of the latter entries, I can't say I'm in love with the franchise, but I appreciate the world destruction stakes. The world, is just at their goddamn fingertips. They must tease and tantalize the world, and they must save the world, and then finish it off so they don't leave it with blue balls. What am I on about? I have no idea. If you have not been paying attention to the Mission Impossible movies, you probably shouldn't start with this, because this is allegedly, probably, should be the final entry in the Tom Cruise, Ethan Don't Call Me, Mike Hunt, line of action films where basically we just build and build and build on the stuff. The first film was more in line with the original television series. The second was arguably the worst of the franchise. 3 was all right, and then we got to 4, we got to 5, we got to 6, we got to 7. And realistically, the budgets have increased, the stunts have increased. Tom Cruise, while being a complete nutcase, and I mean that derogatorily, he also is willing to put his goddamn life on the line and do stunts in the most realistic way possible. Got to give him credit for that. And for those that have been paying attention to the films, you're going to find a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of in-references, and that's basically right where we're at. So what is the Mission Impossible franchise? Well, basically we have, like a subset of, secret super duper agents, IMF. And we just have all this stuff going on, like with, increasing amounts of ridiculousness. There's usually a villain that takes some form of tech or a virus or whatever. In the case of following the events of Dead Reckoning, we have Gabriel, who was trying to basically activate something called the Entity. Now, the Entity actually is some form of, world-destroying AI, but he wants to control it. So actually, it's already activated, but he wants to activate it in his mind. He wants to control it. So, anybody would really want to do that, but there are other people that want to get their hands on this tech, and when we left our intrepid heroes, they were trying to figure out how they were going to get to the bottom of a sea to basically retrieve some tech from the submarine that crashed at the beginning of Dead Reckoning. And so we see the unfolding of those events from there. So that's your catch-up right there. So we have Ethan, who assembles his team. We have Grace, the incredibly gorgeous and gifted Haley Atwell, who, my God, with fucking respect, what a beauty. What a goddamn beauty. You also have Palm K, as I'm going to call her. She plays Paris. Gorgeous, magnificent, captivating. Nick Offerman has a supporting role in this. Simon Pegg returns as Benji. We have Ving Rhames as Luther. We also have Katie O'Brien, the very, very fucking gifted Katie O'Brien, who was in Love Lies Bleeding and Twisters, and just is... I'm so thrilled for her. She seems so down to earth, and she really just has a tremendous screen presence. And from there, we just get other characters as well. We do get a lot of tiebacks to the previous films I'll talk about in the spoilers section. And the upping of the stakes. This is a near 3-hour-long movie. This is one hell of a way to try and close out the whole thing, because that's the one thing about the other movies. You had the first one, I think, was actually the shortest. Second one, and then they would just gradually increase the time. And I think by the time we got to the 6th, it was 2.5 hours. And then the 7th was 2 hours and 30-something, 30-something minutes or 40 minutes. And this is right around that. So a lot of people might be thinking, oh, holy shit. If you're not a fan of the Mission Impossible movies and you've only watched them just to catch up to this, and you're not necessarily a fan, but you appreciate it, I'm not sure what you're going to necessarily think of this. That much I'll say right there. This did also cost around $400 million, apparently, due to these strikes and also increased costs and whatever the fuck. They put production, to a halt. There was, other stuff going on. So basically $400 million, an alleged $400 million. And Dead Reckoning did not exactly clean up at the box office. I mean, it did well, but considering that Barbenheimer happened, there was almost, a bit of a pause. Like, holy shit, should we really be spending that much? And yeah, nobody anticipated the strikes and shit were going to happen. And I'm just thankful the writers and the actors and, everybody involved in that got paid extra for how long we don't know. But the thing is about this is, if you're locked in, then you're absolutely going to be there opening day. I decided to watch this after watching the live-action Lilo and Stitch. Sat down in a pretty nice theater. And it is the best entry in the goddamn franchise. What a fucking way to go out. That is exactly how you close out a fucking franchise. That is how you cement it, plant the flag, whatever, kill it, get it off to the point that it just passes out its own goddamn splooge and can never, react again. It is just so satisfied. There we go. There is a plane sequence later in the movie that people have seen the trailer that probably they've read up on. Magnificent. That's well done. A submarine scene that's fantastic. It does not feel like 3 fucking hours or close to 3 hours. It actually feels more like 2. Despite the fact that, and I will say this, I've never necessarily cared for the villains in the Mission Impossible franchise. In fact, that's really been their only ever weakness. And the actor playing Gabriel actually is very good. And he is better here, I think, than he was in Dead Reckoning. Because since it was supposed to be a 2-parter, at least it makes sense that the stakes would be upped and all that. And he does feel like somebody that's always getting one step above and ahead of Ethan and his team. And also, he has ties back to something that, happened in Ethan's past, so that was pretty nice. We do open, by the way, with a message from Tom Cruise presenting the most authentic theatrical experience possible. And he thanks the Cruise, the hardworking people and everything. I'll say that much. Cruise did that. Not a lot of actors would. And then we just get rolling with the opening sequence. It literally goes about 25 minutes before we get to the opening credits. That's really something that movies need to stop doing. Like Indiana Jones 5 did that. I believe the last couple Mission Impossible movies did that. I'm trying to remember. I think it was actually 30 to 35 before we got to it in Dead Reckoning. But we get our usual espionage stuff and everything as we build towards this eventual, we build to the end of the first act, build to the end of the second act, and then build to the finale, where we see who lives, who dies. I will say this much, not everybody in the crew lives. I will say who died when I get to the goddamn spoiler section, but the stunts are great, the action was great. Palm, my God, Katie O'Brien during the brief time she was there just looks like she could lift the world, split the world in two. Haley, magnificent. Angela Bassett as the president. Captivating talent, so gifted. But, there is something from the entity near the beginning of the movie where it said the world is changing, truth is vanishing, war is coming. Oh boy, that's just what you want your AI to say. By the way, I don't think AI is actually going to take over to that point while I'm still alive, but anybody that is watching this is around 20, 15 or 20, you're fucked. Sorry. But we get the entity building and building, basically trying to take hold of a lot of weapons, shall we say, weapons stockpiles. In an effort to basically, forget that the winning rule is not to play. How about a nice game of chess? In fact, I got War Games flashbacks watching this. The movie, not the match concept that Dusty Rhodes came up with and then Triple H butchered. So, it is very, very good, though. It is really just a fucking great time in the theater. And this, again, is coming from somebody that is not the biggest fan of the Mission Impossible franchise. I put a list up on Letterboxd that you can check out. I've given them favorable grades, but I've had my issues, and you can check out other stuff that I've said in other videos about these movies. But stunt work, grandiose scope, and the fact that it builds well, it really does feel like a proper finale. The only way they could really top this is to go into space. And then we need Jason in space. Let's just get everybody in space. That being said, it is in theaters if you want to check it out. Let me know what you guys thought, but I am going to get into spoilers. So 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. Luther dies. Luther dies. He dies basically after getting his poison pill drive destroyed. It was a way to basically kind of destroy the box that would contain the entity that you get with the Jello pudding pup and the frizzle frazzle and all that. And the box thing that looks like a weird cell phone case you got to get from the sub. But what I like is they didn't pull punches on who could possibly be hurt. Now, I personally think they could have killed off a few more characters, if we're being perfectly honest. Because I don't think they killed off enough. And I mean, I know that sounds mean. But Luther dies, and it makes sense given the fact that he is pretty much the longest running character there. Gabriel's always a step ahead. He doesn't appear a ton in this, but he appears enough to where it actually feels like his presence matters more. Also, in the beginning, we see that the entity has fanatical spectators. People that welcome their new AI overlord. The entity essentially is just something, there's a collection of technology, a collection of intelligence, or, information from humanity and stuff like that. And it does tie back to the rabbit's foot in MI3, that virus. And without you, Ethan, there is no entity. Which I thought was a nice little thing. And there are so many Easter eggs and in references and things going on that it would be impossible for me to cover every single one of them. So I'm going to hit the high points. And really, this thing just flows very, very well. It's just hard to cover every single aspect of it because it's such a mammoth movie. We bought back and forth between what Ethan's doing. Also, Grace and the others have to do something to where they're going to set up where Ethan is going to go to the sub. He's going to get into the sub with, the proper equipment and everything. And he's going to come back up. And the only way to avoid getting the bends, because he's going to have a limited amount of time because of the pressure pushing down on him, no man has thought. He is going to need some way to get the bends out of him. Quicker. The bends, by the way, is if you rise, say you're 100 feet down on the goddamn ocean floor. Say the ocean is only 100 feet deep. No, say you're about 100 feet down. You would have to take it easy when you get to about 50 feet. Now, I mean, I actually don't know if you would have to worry about that as much, but if you get to like 300, 400, 500 feet and you're scuba diving, you gotta take it easy. Because your body's got to adjust to the pressure, get back up, because it's a lot more pressurized down there. This has been physics with me. So, Gabriel had a friggin' entity echo chamber, I guess is the best way I could describe it. You have questions, the entity has answers. The only thing you have to do is let it in. Now, lay it into your mind, it will tell you this stuff, and Gabriel is obsessed with the entity, but he feels he can control it. The entity is kind of manipulating him, though, because he really looks like a fucking telenovela villain, if we're being perfectly honest. I mean, I just mean the way he's presented. No, Antonio, too sexy, but I must. Who remembers that Antonio Banderas SNL parody? So, essentially, the idea is after Ethan gets in that, the entity knows all this stuff, but the entity also knows that if it finds a way to, it can be shut down. Now, it's difficult, but there is this thing called the Doomsday Vault in South Africa, in caves, underground, a giant computer with 1 billion gigabytes. That's a lot of fucking gigabytes, by the way. That'd be a massive computer. Also, a lot of water around these hard drives and everything, so I don't know how safe that is, but okay. So the idea is basically the entity wants to be put in there. And if the entity's in there, then what the entity can do is what it's been doing. Getting hold of the nuclear launch codes of the various stockpiles around the world. It has 4 countries left. And it has 2. And then it gets to just the U.S. And Angela Bassett, Madam President, I'll call her Madam if she wants. She, I don't have issues, shut up. She basically has to make the decision now, you're going to blow up one U.S. city and save, kill 100 million people and save 7 billion or what? I guess? They kind of glossed over a few things here. That seems like a bit of a jump. Gabriel, he stole Luther's poison pill, driving in. Luther dies in that explosion, as I mentioned. And then there's that. Remember, like there were a couple agents like that popped up here and there in Dead Reckoning. One was slightly, one was dark, one was white. Basically, is the best way I can describe it. And there was a character named Briggs. Well, it turns out Briggs is actually the son of Jon Voight's character from the first movie. Good tie back. They didn't go enough of a place with it. I think that they mostly introduced it and then seemed to forget about it, and I felt like they could have dived in a little bit more on that. I'm not saying this movie's absolutely fucking perfect, but for the spectacle, it absolutely deserves to be seen. So, we get recaps of, certain events, like stuff that Ethan did and everything, certain, things going on in the beginning, especially, but then later on we get recaps of other MI stuff. So, while Ethan is trying to get to this submarine to get to the other submarine that's sunk, he jumps in the cold water, because that's what you fucking do when you don't have any other plans, just jump into shit. But he ends up getting rescued, and then he meets the crew that is going to basically save his life, and Katie O'Brien, again, with fucking respect, what a goddess she is. I will watch just about anything she's in. If you have not seen her in Love Lies Bleeding, please fucking watch that. That's on Max, I believe. But, she makes the most of her screen time. She doesn't give it a lot of time. But we do get Grace, Benji, and, of course, Paris, Palm K, going to this outpost where there's this character, Lundo. Lundo, I think is. And it turns out he was the tech for another vault, the one from MI1, when he sunk, Tom Cruise did the sink down and everything, or, did the wires and stuff like that, and he left the knife, and then the guy who picked up the knife, that's him. That's a good tie back. He said, Ethan, you have nothing to apologize for. He said this later on after the house caught fire and other stuff was going on because of these Russian soldiers that showed up. And Palm K at one point beat up one of them and, just was like choking him out. It was like, me next. So, nevertheless, he basically says, look, Ethan, I could still be working there and I would not be living my life and also wouldn't have met the woman of my dreams, an Inuit woman. And by the way, the Inuit tribe actually is prevalent to the fact that the crew some of the crew of the submarine that was downed was found there, and then they found the key, that double cross key thing. And that was nice. That was a nice way to do it. It proves that life finds a way. So he, the entity basically, having its fanatics, there's a fanatic on the sub at one point that tries attacking Tom Cruise. Some of the equipment gets damaged, yet somehow the sub is okay. I don't really understand what's going on here. Again, Katie O'Brien, my mime. The villains in the outpost were kind of just generic guys. That was just a way for the house to catch fire and all that stuff. But they have a dog sled, the wife and Grace. But Grace needs to take over the dog sled so the wife can rest. So the sub, this is after Ethan gets this high-powered thing where he's breathing certain chemicals as a way to balance because they're pretty far, but they haven't tested it far enough where he's going to go. And he goes down to the sub. But he has to get out of a moving sub because they can't stay in one place necessarily because they're in Russian waters. And then he manages to get there to the sub, and he opens the door, and it changes the pressure. And suddenly you see that, just below, it's hanging off of a cliff slightly. Powder. So it's starting to shift. And there's torpedoes all over the place. All this stuff's going on. Water is leaning like this. It's magnificent, the way it's filmed. The director of this, by the way, the writer director, is one that did Jack Reacher and also the last 3 Mission Impossible movies before this. So he's worked with Tom Cruise quite a bit. In fact, probably will work with him again. But that's a magnificent scene, the sub part. And he manages to get in a tube. He manages to get the... I'm just going to call it the... I'm just going to call it the pocketbook, the pocket monster. He just gets the pocket monster there. The thing that he needs to put the poison pill drive in to get the entity to do something. And all this crazy shit's going on. Now, he's doing the sub work and trying to get out of the sub. And it's starting to really roll. It's starting to get fucked up. Why I waited till now to have this issue, I don't know. But he has to strip down, basically, and, to get through this tube, and then he's going to get his equipment back on. Now, he gets all the stuff there, but he's swimming in just little bike shorts up to the surface, but then he starts to have issues. Because he's got the bends. Can't get that far. And he's dead. That's it. Movie's over. The world's going to end. Oh, wait, no. They had the little, inflatable chamber thing that they talked about. That Benji talked about before. Out of nowhere. They managed to meet all at the same time, even though it didn't seem like they were gonna. And then Cruz recovers. Grace kind of, says, you could control the entity. We don't have to get rid of it. You kind of do, though, given what it's gonna fucking do. So, now, they're gonna go to the caves. They're gonna go to this Doomsday Vault. Now, something that they described with Ludlow, and what Benji described is, and even Luther had talked about this, Luther before he got killed. The only way, basically, to get the entity into the vault, but not have it take over the vault, is to do something where you trick it, and then you have this gold, weird flash drive thing that looks like a mini version of the stone from the Fifth Element. And, the ones that were dug out of that opera singer that was 15 years old when Luc Besson started banging it. Let's move on from that. Google Luc Besson, opera singer from the Fifth Element. You'll see what I mean. So, the idea is they have to do a certain amount of sequences, and just as the thing's uploaded, pull the drive. If they pull it too soon, they won't catch the entity. They pull it too late, the entity's going to get to do what it wants to do. 100 milliseconds. Blink of an eye. Who's going to do it? Grace, because Grace is a pickpocket. Makes sense. So they're in the caves. Gabriel has the higher ground. The idea is to give him that, pocket monster thing, have him put the poison pill drive in, and then he won't know that he's poisoning and killing the entity. The thing is, that goes tits up because Kittredge shows up, as well as Phelps. And things are not going well. By the way, there's also a bomb here in the cave that's going to blow up. It is fucking bedlam. Like a 20-minute bomb that looks really, really fucking big. Also looks like a section of lemon roll, and now I need that. Now I need some fucking lemon roll. Maybe I'll make a trip to Walmart soon after this. So the whole point is, they're in this cave, and this clock is ticking down, and even Phelps is like, we need to get away from this. We need to get away. And Kittredge is like, no, he's going to explain this to me. You're going to blow up. Gabriel also mentioned a little bit earlier that he had a plane and even had a spare that runs on analog, like planes from the Mummy, just without the crazy British guy that died. But we then get a shootout. Benji ends up getting shot. Lundo, his wife, and one of the agents, not named Phelps, is staying behind to take care of the bomb. Disrupt the bomb and stuff like that. Basically make it where it'll explode, but it won't be a megaton explosion. 30 megaton explosion like it was. Meanwhile, Ethan is driving out of the cave and trying to get to Gabriel. Gabriel is in a plane. There's the other plane following him. And then we get the best goddamn sequence of the whole thing, where I can't even describe it beyond saying that Tom Cruise is insane. Is on one plane, punches a guy out, after almost hanging off and dying on the plane, punches a guy out, has to get into the other seat after he tossed the guy out, because it actually turns out, by the way, that it's a spare plane. He basically, it's not as powerful as the yellow one, but Gabriel's still going to take him down. So even after he gets control of that plane, boom, 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 there, Gabriel's like, this kind of stuff. He's kind of laughing maniacally, and I actually did appreciate that. But he's got the flash drive, the poison pill drive hanging off of him. Ethan's got the pocket monster thing. I always said it would come back to me, Gabriel says. And then he gets on Gabriel's plane, brilliant, just before the red plane explodes. And now, I apologize, by the way, bad allergies, ran out of wind, but essentially they're on the plane. Ethan's hanging off of the belt, this kind of stuff. Like, it's not looking good. Gabriel's trying to stab him with a knife. And he got hit at one point, but like, okay, that's it. Now, one punch isn't going to take him. But then Ethan manages to gain the advantage and snap his arm. And it bends in a way that nature never intended for an arm to bend. And he finally proves he's just a giant pussy. I mean, granted, I think we'd all cry and scream if our fucking arm was broken. But it proves that really he's just smarter. He's not much of a fucking fighter. Now, he manages to... He's still, the main villain and everything, this kind of stuff, but his arm's fucked, and then he manages to, he's hanging off the plane, even though Ethan has the poison pill and has that, he says, only one of us has a parachute, and this kind of stuff, and have fun, Ethan, this kind of stuff, but he slips, and his head hits the cardboard, the back of the plane. It kills him. It's fucking hilarious. It is great. And that is just, God, that was great. Man, that was great. And then Ethan does have a parachute. He manages to fly down, except then the explosion from the plane catches the parachute on fire. Now he's going down. But he gets the poison pill in there. Meanwhile, Benji, by the way, is dealing with the fact he has a collapsed lung. Paris even has to do surgery on him, cut him, and put a straw in there to basically give him enough air, but he's fading out of consciousness because his blood pressure is dropping. The idea is basically Grace has to cut this wire right when the button turns green, cut the wire, and pull the drive in a just blink of an eye. Ethan manages to do that. He's going down. Light turns green. She gets it. Did she get it soon enough? She did, of course, because this is the end of it. We're not going to go with that. We're not going to go with something, being all, world destroying. And Angela Bassett also was about to do the thing with the nuclear code during, or launch the nukes during that. But Nick Offerman ended up saving them from some rogue guy that was another entity person, whatever. I guess the entity just started taking over people, just like the Ready Player One headset. But they have the entity in this flash drive, and personally, I would just throw it to the bottom of the ocean. I don't think anybody's ever going to find it, but whatever. Then they all meet kind of in a town square. We'll always have Paris. I would love to have the Paris from this movie, but I digress. Grace hands him that. Seems like everything's okay. Luther also left him a voicemail saying, I knew you would find a way because you're you. I'll see you one day, brother, but hopefully not anytime soon. Good way to send Ving Rhames off, and good way to send the franchise off, because then we go to credits, and that's it. There's no reason to do another one. What the fuck are you going to do after that? Literally go to space. That's all they can do. And I don't know. They can't do another one. Cruise is in his 60s. Can only do so much. Great cast. Great stuff. I mean, there's no place to go but down. I don't even think that's how that phrase works. Long review, but A+. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin, and I'll see you soon.